Hello, friends. Today is the last day of our National Wildlife Week 2023. It is 8th October. The celebration or observation of the Wildlife Week started on 2nd October, and many organizations celebrated this week in India uh, as per the scope of their work. Um, it is said that last but not the least. You might have heard this phrase. So, Foundation for Ecological Welfare thought that uh, though this is the last day, it should not be considered less important. And the foundation has decided to do some interesting online programs today and some other day of this week. Okay. So, as far as today's programs are concerned, online program is concerned, we have kept two items. One item is a presentation by Mr. Akshit Suthar from Clemson University, USA, which is in South Carolina. And he will be talking about the use of drone technology for wildlife studies and wildlife conservation. So it will be really interesting program for all of us, so interesting talk for all of us who are in India. And the second item will be an interesting film on wetlands as wildlife habitat. Here I have used the word wildlife for basically for avian life. So this film is about the importance of wetlands in our suburban and rural landscapes as avian habitats. Okay, so these are the two programs of today, and we call it as a part one programs. Part two, in which there will be two more interesting presentations. It will be launched sometime during this week, and it will be informed to all of you in advance. Coming to today's programs, we will start it with Akshit's presentation. Akshit is a doctoral student at Clemson University's James C. Kennedy Waterfowl and Wetlands Conservation Center, which is in South Carolina, USA. Under the advice of the world's renowned wetlands and waterbird scientist, Dr. James Anderson, Akshit's research revolves around understanding waterbird habitat relations with antebellum, that is pre-US Civil War, rice field impoundments, utilizing cutting-edge technologies, including drones and autonomous recording units, which are abbreviated as ARUs, in coastal South Carolina, which is essential stopover site for migratory birds in the Atlantic flyways. Akshit has around 10 years of research experience spanning diverse landscapes. Akshit has a strong background in community-based conservation, ecosystem assessment, restoration, wildlife population dynamics, wetlands and waterfowl ecology, quantitative ecology, and the innovative application of ecological technologies. That's very interesting. Innovative application of ecological technologies. So, for all young viewers of this program, just focus on this phrase, innovative application of ecological technologies. Akshit's scholarly contributions extend far and wide, publishing around 13 peer-reviewed articles and providing valuable service as a reviewer for prestigious national and international journals. In addition to his scholarly pursuits, Akshit is an active member of esteemed organizations such as the IUCN Species Survival Commission, the Waterbird Society, the Society for Conservation Biology, and the Wildlife Society, among others. His dedication to the field has not gone unnoticed as he has garnered honors on a national and international scale. Akshit's accomplishments include receiving the Otter Oscar Award in the research category from the International Otter Survival Fund, UK, Rapid Action Grant and Stop Poaching Fund support from the Wildlife Trust of India, the James C. Kennedy Waterfowl and Wetlands Research Fellowship, USA, and grants from the Wildlife Society's Biological Diversity Working Group and Human Dimension Working Group, USA, to name just a few. Uh, Today, Akshit will be talking on the groundbreaking use of drone technology for wildlife conservation and research. So, guys, this is definitely going to be a very, very interesting talk for all of us in India. And let us learn from Akshit how this drone technology should be used for wildlife conservation and research. So, I hand over to Akshit without wasting much of your time. Over to Akshit.
Hello everyone. Thank you for joining us today on the occasion of National Wildlife Week. First, I would like to thank you, Dr. Ketan Tatu, for your warm introduction, for organizing this event, and inviting me to talk about the extraordinary role of drone as emerging technology for wildlife conservation and research. As Dr. Ketan Tatu earlier mentioned, my name is Akshit Suthar. I am a doctoral student at Clemson University's James C. Kennedy Waterfowl and Wetland Conservation Center, South Carolina. Under the supervision of Dr. Jim Anderson, my research focused on understanding waterbird habitat relation with antebellum, known as pre-US Civil War, rice field impoundments using drone and passive acoustic monitoring in coastal South Carolina. As a part of my research, I am developing drone-based aerial strip project to estimate waterbird abundance and also testing and developing new methodology to deploy and retrieve autonomous recording unit, also known as ARU, in inaccessible areas, merging drone and ARUs for secretive Mars birds. So let's start our journey today, explore how drones are changing the landscape for wildlife conservation and research. Globally, wildlife face constant threat by habitat destruction, poaching, and illegal wildlife trade, climate change, and data deficiency. The importance of preserving species and ecosystem cannot be overstated. These ecosystems play vital role in maintaining the balance of our planet. However, preserving wildlife comes with its challenges. Researchers and scientists often struggle to monitor and protect these species effectively. That's where technology step in as a crucial ally. In recent years, technology, particularly drone, has played a pivotal role in revolutionizing wildlife conservation. Drones have emerged as game-changing tool, enabling researchers to monitor and protect wildlife more efficiently and effectively. Throughout this talk, we will explore how drones are transforming conservation efforts worldwide. We will delve into the innovative ways this aerial device and helping safeguard our planet's precious biodiversity. So let's start with what is drone. Let's know what is drone. So drone, also known as unmanned aerial vehicle, originally developed for military applications. This remote control aerial device have come a long way since then. In the 21st century, drones have become increasingly affordable, making them accessible to enthusiasts, photographer, explorer, worldwide, and equipped with cameras, spectral imaging device, and various data collection instruments. They are now used for photography and exploration by everyone around. Drone play pivotal role in research, particularly when it's come to the monitoring wildlife. So here we can see the timeline of military civilization use of the drone. So in the 90s, the target drone developed in the between 1950s and 1960s. The drone used for reconnaissance missions. In 1917, drone used as decoy. In 1980s, drone with real-time surveillance and radar. And in 2000s, the drone become available for civilian for mapping and aerial photography, and drone for industrial inspection and security, precision agriculture. And after that, this technology is continuously emerging and developing, and people are using the drone for various perspective, including the wildlife and environmental conservation. So let's see how the drones are beneficial for wildlife conservation particularly. So basically the aerial perspective. So drones provide a bird's eye view for wildlife and their habitats, enabling researchers to observe from above, which is often essential for monitoring large area. The second benefit is reduce disturbance. Drone can observe and collect data without physically disturbing animal, minimizing human interference and stress on wildlife. Accessing inaccessible areas. They can reach remote, rough, or otherwise challenging terrain, allowing researchers to study wildlife in locations that were previously difficult or dangerous to access. The quick deployment. Drone can be deployed rapidly, making them invaluable for time-sensitive research, such as tracking animal migration or responding to emergency situations. High-resolution imaging. Equipped with high-resolution cameras, drone capture detailed images and videos, aiding in the identification of individual animals, tracking movements, and accessing health data collection. Drone can collect a wide range of data, including thermal imagery, multispectral images, environmental parameters, contributing to comprehensive wildlife studies. The population survey. They assist in conducting accurate population survey, estimating animal numbers, and monitoring changes in population over time. Anti-poaching. Drones are used for anti-poaching efforts, patrolling protected areas, and deterring illegal activities such as poaching and habitat destruction. Scientific research. Researchers use drones to study animal behavior, migration patterns, breeding habitat, and the impact of environmental changes on wildlife. Non-invasive sampling. Drone can deploy non-invasive sampling tools like DART or NET to collect samples, example DNA or hair samples from animals for genetic analysis and health assessment. Emergency response. Drone aid in disaster response and wildlife rescue efforts by quickly assessing damage, locating stranded animals, and coordinating rescue operations. Cost efficiency. Compared to traditional methods like manned aircraft or ground survey, drones are often more effective, especially for large-scale wildlife research projects. The real-time data. They provide real-time data imagery, allowing for immediate analysis and decision-making during conservation efforts and research mission. So this is the benefit of drone, and we will discuss these more details in the next slides. So let's talk about the drone application. So drones are now being used increasingly. It is very novel, new technology, but it is being used increasingly in conservation and ecological applications. I have listed some of the sites that you can see in front of you. The first is to estimate the abundance and disturbance, the distribution of wild animals. But on top of that, you have some very nice applications such as locating animals with radio tags, also to look at the stress of animal in response to human activities. The drone is used to collect DNA samples from whales when they come to the surface of the ocean and exhale. Those samples can tell scientists a lot about the genetic origin of the whales. You can tell them about the health of individual and can even tell you if whale is pregnant or not. So you can collect a huge wealth of information by using drones in your survey. And then on top of just information for wildlife animals, you can also collect a lot of supplementary data information on the surrounding habitat that animals choose to breed or migrate to. So we can do habitat mapping. We can learn about things like plastic pollution and the distribution of plastic in the ocean. Drones are now also being used in anti-poaching efforts, particularly in places like Africa, where we have large mammals that are at threat. and even to monitor the spread of invasive species. So they are an incredible powerful monitoring tool, and I have just show you some of them. So let's talk about drone anatomy. So I have just shown you some of the photos of some drones here. There are a huge number of drones available in the markets, and they range in size and anatomy. So the three main type of the drone, the multi-rotor drones that use propellers to take off and land to move. I have given you some photos of some quadrocopter drone here because they are very well used now. They are pretty cheap and they are pretty easy to use. But then we also have a fixed wing drone which look a lot more like aircraft. So they have properly fixed wing, as the name would suggest. And then we have hybrid type of drone which has both propellers and fixed wing, and they use the propeller to take off and land, and then they use the wings to navigate. So there is a huge number of consideration when you are actually looking for a drone to purchase for your research. So let's talk more about the drone anatomy and their parts. So I'm moving on to some of the main components of drone. So this is again a quadrocopter drone here, and we have the propellers and we have the motors that makes the propellers work. We then have the main body of the drone, and that contains all of the important parts of. So you have the GPS module, which is in the help navigate. You have a transmitter and a receiver in that main body. And you usually have what is called a flight controller, which is essential the brain of the drone. And then there are two important components. One is the power supply. So you need to make sure that it is fully charged before you start flying, obviously. And then the other is the camera. And I am going to go and talk you about different type of camera in a second. We then usually have some kind of ground control station, which is where you control the drone when it is in flight. So you can need to ensure that your ground control station and your power supply are fully charged. You need to ensure that you give good GPS coverage to maintain control of that drone the whole time it is in the air. Then it is always good practice to have a mobile phone fully charged available in case you need to communicate with air traffic control. So let's talk more about the different cameras because this is the very important component of the drone. And because of this technology, people are using drone widely in the wildlife research. So okay, so let's talk about the cameras. Again, there are a huge range of consideration for which camera to use particular for your study site and your species. Very commonly used are visual spectrum camera, and that's just you normal kind of color image that you would use to see. It's called the RGB, red, blue, and green camera. They can be significant depending on what species you are using for. However, they have limitations. So if you have a species that contrast with their background, they have pretty limited utility. So it will be quite challenging to detect animals sometime in those images. If you are working in very high light conditions, or if you are working with species that nest in dense vegetation or in and under trees, obviously they have limited utilities. In that kind of case, other cameras such as thermal infrared cameras are helpful. Now these are being used more and more for animals, ecological research. And just because of some of these constraints that people are coming across, and they are fantastic. And you can see some example just on your right hand side of the same image using two different type of cameras. But they do have their own drone bags as well. One is that the data are very low spatial resolution. You can run into issue with background heat, especially in the topics, and that can make it very difficult to distinguish your animal from your habitat background. And then if you have multiple species in your image, it can be very difficult to distinguish between different species in thermal imageries. So there are so many drones on the market now and capable of doing both of the same time. So you get both streams of data, which are really cool. So you can use the some drones available with thermal camera and the RBG camera. So that's really cool stuff. So this is the basics about the drone anatomy and the different type of cameras. So basically, if you start to using the drone and flying, then the regulations are very important. So you must know and aware about the regulation within the country you are flying or within the state or area you are flying the drone. So basically, we need to consider the local aviation regulations, wildlife protection law, data privacy law, research permits. So let's talk about the local aviation regulations. The drone are subject to avian regulation that's vary from one country to another. These regulations dedicate factors such as altitude limit, no fly zone, example like near airports you cannot fly the drone, and licensing requirement for drone operator. It is essential for researcher to be aware of and adhere to these local regulations. Wildlife protection and laws. Many countries have specific laws and regulations governing the use of drone in proximity of wildlife, particularly in protected areas. These laws are designed to minimize disturbance to animals and their habitat. Violating these regulations can have serious legal consequences. Data privacy law. Depending on the jurisdiction, capturing images or data of people or private property with drones may be subject to privacy law. Researcher must be aware of and respect the privacy right individual when conducting survey or research in populated area. Research permits. In some cases, researcher may need permits to use drone for wildlife research. These permits may come with uh, conditions to ensure animal minimal impacts on the environment and wildlife. It is essential to obtain the necessary permits and compile with any associated requirements. So this is the very important things before you considering the use the drone for your wildlife research. So you need to go through this all four aspect and uh, use the drone accordingly. And here is the complex volumetry airspace designation that broadly apply globally. So this is the different airspace considered for the safety flight of the manned aircraft. So there is a different airspace which we need to learn about that, and we need to consider that when we are flying the drone. So we are not going details about this different airspace, but in the future, if we get the chance, then definitely we will go in details about the different airspace and different laws regarding the airspace and how we can fly the drone nearby that airspace. So let's talk about the regulation. So there are a lot of things that we need to remember about regulation when you are flying the drone. So there are some simple things like in the United States and UK there are the different applications designed by the avian agencies, the government. So basically, when you are trying to start flying the drone, then you can have your GPS location here, and it will give you some warning that you can fly, you do not fly, or particular temporary flight restriction areas and all. So these apps are very important. So I'm not sure about in the different countries has the different app, but in the United States we are using the before you fly app, and it's very easy. Even if you need to communicate with the ATS tower, then you can send a message, and you can even communicate with the air traffic control system using this application as well. So all people need to consider that using this app it would be more easy, and you do not need to remember so many stuff. So this is the simple things like do and do's about the drones. So here is do's like remain in your particular follow the manuals of the flight, keep the drone in your visual sights. When you see any aeroplanes, and then just immediately land your drone. Do not fly the drone on some people's. Try to avoid some restricted areas. So this is all basic things that we need to keep in mind and remember while we are flying drone. Like never fly the drone under any influence of the drugs or alcohol. Do not uh, throw any substance with the drone. Do not lift any, hazardous or dangerous substance using the drone. So this is we need to always keep in mind to be a good and safe drone pilot. So this is the field consideration that before you fly that we need to keep in mind. So with different aviation authorities, you are going to find that they will require some form of good record keeping just in case of anything goes wrong. And this is usually required a pre-site assessment or site assessment form to be filled out. And then making sure that you conduct your pre-flight safety checks, which will include assessing any potential hazards or obstruction at your site, being aware of any restricted flight areas. For example, are you near any airports? Where are the public access points that are near you? Are there any buildings, cables, livestock that you need to consider? And then, once you have gone throughout all of that, you need to ensure that you have all of your necessary health and safety equipments on hand. And two-way communication are important. Once we have done all of that, you can check throughout your aircraft, you controller, and then battery supplies and ensure everything is good to go. And then, really important, do a weather check. Hence, the wind direction, the wind speed, and the wind stability will affect your drone, how the drone perform in the air. So basically, you need to understand how that works and how it will affect your drone. It is when it's moved. And then, if you are working in any urban areas, generally there is a need to communicate with air traffic control, especially if you are near airport. So quite often you will need to call or send the message to the air traffic control and request them to take off and get clearance from them. So basically, and then last but not least, you need to know that emergency procedure just in case anything goes wrong, which hopefully will not. So this is all about the drone anatomy, drone camera, safety, because this is the very important component before you start flying. And in the field consideration. So okay, so enough of safety. And the last thing I will mention quickly is disturbance to the animals, which is really important consideration when we are working close to or with any wildlife. As I am sure you are all highly aware. So any new aerial object near animal can be perceived as a threat by animals and as an aerial predator. An animal can respond to drone in various ways. Some of the disturbance effect notable include disturbance of behavior such as foraging or roosting. It can cause animal stress in certain instances that are not immediately visible. In extreme instance, there is a risk of injury to the animal. If you are flying a drone near an animal and if the animal react negatively and then if you are working in especially highly dense colonies and they flush as a response to the drone, there is obviously a risk of damage to eggs, and it is extreme condition. There is a risk of animal deserting their nest or their chicks. So those all are potentials, but it does vary. Highly depends on different species. It varies highly between different life stage, whether you are working on breeding adult or non-breeding adult or young birds or breeding stage. Are they actively breeding or it is during the non-breeding period? So this is all importance, differently the animals can respond to the drone. And then it is varies with the type of drone that you are using. So this is also important, which type of drone you are using. It is varies with the flight technique that you are using, and it is varies between locations. So what you need to do if you are working in a new area, what we recommend that you need to do the pre-flight plan. Like the first thing to do would be to measure the disturbance. That how you can measure that disturbance. So start flying high and see how the animal responds within the height range that you are allowed to fly within. And then, if there is no response, you can drop your height slightly. A range of studies has suggested that, as a rule of thumb, a height of around 50 meters is a lowest recommended height for wildlife. However, again, it's depend on location and species. So I see, in the some people, they can go almost 20, 25, or 30 meters, and there is no disturbance they observe. So it's always depend on, different species, different type, different terrains. So proceed with caution and try to minimize your disturbance. But the take home message from this all is the disturbance is less using drone technology than if you are using a traditional ground survey with an extensive team walking into the colony close to the birds. So it is all relative and proceed with caution. So this is some, let's talk about some case studies. So here is the case study of the open ground nesting uh, survey. It's conducted in United Kingdom, and this is the many tons nudies and gulls they consider using the drone to estimate the nesting species in the with the aerial survey. And here is the another example of the arboreal tree brush nesting species. So this is the frigaters bird, pelicans, redfoot boobies, cormorant, and noddies. So you can use the drone technology for the arboreal, the tree nesting species, which you cannot, actively or accurately can see from the ground. So this is the another example from the Simus Island. So there the researcher, if you are going in the mangroves and if you need to estimate the water birds or birds, nesting birds in the mangrove, particularly, it's very difficult because there is a mud and there is a dense vegetation as well. So who is working in mangrove, they know how to how difficult it is. So the researcher are developing the technologies like the aerial strip transect in the mangrove ecosystem, and they compare that numbers with the ground count, and they are observing that which methodology is more accurate. So they did some long-term surveys, and then they found that the drone survey has the is less time consuming and is provide more accurate data, and basically the aerial perspective. So even the thermal cameras, here you cannot see anything here, but if you the same images with the thermal camera, you can see some animals or some bird species are present here, are using that habitat. So that's very important, to have the absence and present data of the animal as well. So here is another case study, and this is from the Everglades. So where they plan the mission, this is how we can plan the mission. So in the future, if we get the chance to interact, I will discuss more about the how to plan different kind of missions for the drone surveys. There are some automated flight plan as well, So we will discuss about that as well. So this is the post processing and the data analysis. So let's go in detail, you know. So this is the drone image that we can get with the aerial drone survey, and then we can stitch all the images. It's called the photogrammetry, and when we create this image, it's called the orthomosaic. Even we can discuss in details about that too in the future. So when you analyze the data, then you can see here. Okay, so here you can see the alligators here, the birds are here. This is the Iceland. So you can count the birds from that aerial surveys. You can count the nesting nest from the aerial surveys. You can count the colonies from the aerial surveys. Even you can also measure the animals from the aerial survey as well. Even if you have the aerial surveys and it's a geo reference, then you can exactly measure the length of particular animals like alligator here. And this is the colony of the nesting arboreal birds here. So even with the drone images, you can do some habitat classification as well. So this is the basically the aerial drone image, the orthomosaic, and here the researcher do that land use, land cover, and vegetation uh, classification using the drone images. Also the researcher are using the drone for the whale shark, and they are measure the whale shark sorry the whale's body, and health condition as well. So, when you have the large amount the data and then you need to do everything manually. So just think about like you have 1,800 photos, right? And checking all the photos take 1 minute, and then it will take around 1,800 minutes or 30 hours or 3.75 days. So it's like, once you have the data, then the data analysis sometimes is time consuming as well in the lab. So there are the researcher are also developing some, the deep machine learning, artificial intelligence that you can feed that aerial images to that models, and the aerial images can identify or count the species, you know, with the aerial images. So here we can see the rhino, 62 percentage chances of the rhino. Is the hippopotamus, that 81 percentage chances of the hippopotamus. Here is some bird species like gadwals and other species like, that there is a chances of almost 94 percentage chances, 84 percentage chances to have, that is the gadwal. So it's very cool technology as well. So basically, when we uh, survey that what we need to do with our data. So the other consideration is the observe bias and standardize it. Time and skill need to analyze the imageries, correction factors for varying detection rate, plumage, morph, sex, life stage, etc., and the data storage requirement. So this is very important as well with the drone images. So let's do, just play a game like, how many boobies are here in this image. So boobies are the birds, and this is the brown color bird. So I will give you, 15 seconds that you can, how many birds you can count. The A is 0, B 3, C 5, and D is 12. So your time start now. All right, let's see the answer. Okay, so there is a 3 boobies present here in this image. So this is the also challenges, with the aerial images, that you need to zoom it and you need to um, you need to have the skill to analyze the data as well. Okay, let's go for one more game. So here is the how many cormorants are in this image. So this is the cormorant you can see. So, you know this is a challenging because it can there is a glare. That's a more one more challenge, using the drone technologies, that if you are using, during the noon time, during the, you know high, high con- the sunlight time, then definitely, you can get some glare here in that images. And there is a habitat, it can be, the animals can camouflage with the habitat as well, so it's challenging. So let's start. You have 15 seconds. All right, let's see answer. Okay, so answer is 49. It's very difficult, challenging, right? Yeah. So this is all I had about the drone. So we learn about, basics about the drone, where we can use, what is the laws we need to follow about the drone, and we learn about some case studies, how the researcher worldwide using the drone technology in the different aspects. So I would like to thank you for your time and joining us today. If you have any questions, here is my email address. You can send me your question here. Even you can send your question to Dr. Ketan Tatu, and he will reach out to me. And yeah, feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. And if we get any opportunities in the future, then definitely we can go into more details about, how to design your flight plan, and, what should consider when you are using particular your drone in particular habitats or for the particular species. So again, I would like to thank you all, and happy National Wildlife Week.
Wonderful talk, Akshit. So interesting and full of information and knowledge for all of us. And Foundation for Ecological Welfare is really, really fortunate to have you uh, today for your presentation. Uh, as a founding director of Foundation for Ecological Welfare, I am really grateful to you to spare your time. Despite I know you were extremely busy and you were in fact traveling, but still you spared your time. Basically, we are working for young students and researchers, and you had today really contributed a very wonderful thing for all of them. Thank you, Akshit. Now, viewers, our second item is a documentary film in English on feathered wildlife of wetlands in suburban and rural landscapes. Friends, we know that when we say the word wildlife, in many people's mind, the charismatic animals come into picture, like this elephants and lions and this rhinos and whatnot. But we often forget that the wild birds in the wetlands, in our rural and suburban landscape, uh, that is also a wonderful thing to learn, to observe, and to learn, and to conserve also. So this film emphasizes that concept. This film will show you a variety of water birds and water bird habitats which are found in not some remote areas, right? But in our next door neighbor kind of things, that is suburban and rural landscapes. Okay. So please enjoy this documentary film, which might take at least 25 to 30 minutes, and try to learn from that film how these wetlands are important, and what you can study over there, and what you should try to conserve. So over to the film.
India is celebrating 69th Wildlife Week during 2nd to 8th October 2023. Many people still relate wildlife to charismatic animals living in forest, grasslands, and hot deserts. When asked about wildlife, the first thing that may come to the minds of laymen is one or the other thrilling animal, either lion or tiger or giraffe or zebra. But do you know that numerous water birds inhabiting ponds in our villages or suburbs or irrigation reservoirs and dams in our agrarian landscapes constitute wildlife too? Ducks, flamingos, swamp hens, egrets, storks, spoonbills, cormorants, terns, and a variety of waders occurring in our ponds, tanks, dams, and irrigation reservoirs in our neighborhood can also be referred to as wildlife. Some of them are even migratory, which come to our village or suburban ponds after flying for thousands of kilometers each year, usually during winter. Our ponds and reservoirs were earlier called water bodies. However, since 1970s, another term, wetlands, has become popular, which includes many types of water bodies and water-saturated or waterlogged areas. Of course, wetlands are not limited to ponds, lakes, and reservoirs. The term wetland is applicable to the lands inundated by waters or the lands saturated with waters. As per explanation and definition by Ramsar Convention 1971, which is an international treaty for the conservation and wise use of wetlands, a plethora of natural or man-made water bodies with flowing or standing waters, as also water-saturated land areas, are referred to as wetlands. Wetlands can either be inland or coastal, and their waters can either be fresh, brackish, or saline. In Indian context, ponds, tanks, lakes, lagoons, floodplains, irrigation reservoirs, dams, streams, seashore, Mangroves, coral reefs, creeks and estuaries, etc. are some of the well-known wetlands. Wetlands play a number of ecological functions and provide multiple ecosystem services. One of the important ecological functions is provisioning of habitat and food to aquatic avian wildlife. On the other hand, a very important ecosystem service of the wetlands is rendering opportunity to birders and wildlife photographers to fulfill their respective passions. An important cause for the richness of wildlife in any ecosystem is its high habitat diversity. Wetland ecosystem, as simple as a village pond or an irrigation reservoir, is no exception to this general rule. In our inland wetlands like lakes, ponds and reservoirs, which are known to support good avian diversity, at least 3 to 4 habitats play important roles. Moreover, the edges formed at the interface of one or more of these habitats provide best of both worlds to a variety of birds wanting to fulfill their foraging life requisites on one hand and resting or roosting requisites on the other hand. At majority of village ponds, lakes or reservoirs, open water area is a dominant habitat. In such inland wetlands that are formed due to depression in the land surface, the open water zone is usually located away from the wetland periphery and towards the central portion of the depression. Though the surface of open water zone often appears lacking any vegetation, it is often characterized by the presence of submerged aquatic plants which complete their life cycle underwater. The submerged plants provide food to many species of herbivorous and omnivorous ducks and geese in the form of seeds and tubers. Macroinvertebrates that live attached to these plants also provide food to omnivorous or carnivorous waterfowl. Examples of submerged plants are Potamogeton, Vallisneria, Ceratophyllum, Hydrilla, Cara and Nigella. Another important habitat component of an inland wetland like lake or pond is emergent aquatic vegetation cover. This is a feature which considerably shapes the external appearance and wildlife value of a wetland. According to the research by certain wetland scientists, good diversity and abundance of birds occur in the wetlands having half of the wetland area under emergent hydrophytic cover. Usually, this habitat is predominantly associated with wetland shore and its nearby shallow water areas. The emergent aquatic vegetation cover can also be referred to as emergent hydrophytic cover, as hydrophyte is a scientific term for macrophyte growing in watery environment. Tall plants like cattails or typha, sages and aquatic grasses constitute this habitat, which is very valuable for wetland wildlife. Many secretive water birds like rails, crates and bitterns, and to some extent other birds like purple heron and purple swamp hen can forage, rest or even nest within or adjacent to such cover. Even some terrestrial birds like silverbill often nest in emergent hydrophytic cover. Some of these plants have tubers or combs on which birds like geese and cranes depend for their food requirement. Many macroinvertebrates live on emergent hydrophytes or amidst the emergent hydrophytic cover, and they constitute a major food resource for several carnivorous or omnivorous wetland dependent birds. Wetlands are often endowed with the blanket of floating leaves of rooted plants like water lily and lotus. Such cover of floating leaved rooted hydrophytes is essential for the foraging activity of some special birds like jacanas, which have evolved special long toes to walk on these leaves. Duckweed or lemna is a free-floating hydrophyte. Though its name is duckweed, it is less valuable as a direct food item for ducks. But lemna has very high habitat value for macroinvertebrates on which omnivorous waterfowl depend to fulfill their food requirement. Open water areas of some wetlands are often dotted with islets. And many of our wetlands, especially natural or semi-natural inland wetlands, have land arms or land strips extending from shore towards open water areas. These islets and land strips, along with their ages, are extremely important for fulfilling resting and roosting life requisites of a variety of ducks, shorebirds, terns, cormorants, darters, etc. Waterbirds like egrets, herons, and some shorebirds use ages for foraging too. Such islets or land strips are even used by terrestrial birds like wagtails, pipits, and larks for fulfilling their food requirements. Even the muddy or sandy shores of wetlands provide food and resting and roosting opportunities to several ducks, terns, and waders. One may find ground nests of some waders like black-winged stilt on wetland shore too. Undoubtedly, the beauty of winged wildlife in the wetland ecosystem is largely due to habitat diversity in those wetlands. If we want beauty of winged wildlife in ponds and lakes in our neighborhood, we must use different physical components of these wetlands very wisely instead of blindly deepening, draining, dredging, or filling them. In words of conservationist and philosopher Aldo Leopold, our ability to perceive quality in nature begins as in art with the pretty. It expands through successive stages of the beautiful to values as yet uncaptured by language. In a nutshell, to enjoy the beauty of winged wildlife of wetland ecosystems in our neighborhood for many years, people must understand the importance of habitat diversity in those wetlands. Instead of considering wetlands mainly as water storage reservoirs, people should also consider wetlands' value as wildlife abodes and should strive to conserve habitat diversity within those wetlands.
So friends, I'm pretty sure that you must have enjoyed the film. When next time when you will go to some field visit, when you will visit some wetland, you will have something in your mind from this film. Okay, so that way we will consider this film to be successful. Okay, so dear friends, part one of this Wildlife Week program is over. Online program is over today, and part two, as I said, will have two more presentations on interesting and scientific topics, and they will be shared with you in very near future, that is during this week itself. It can be just day after tomorrow. So you will get an email from few.ecology@gmail.com in advance, which will mention the time and the rather date and time of this part two of Wildlife Week celebration programs. So I'm really grateful to all of you to register to our programs, and I hope that in future also you will keep registering like that, because that the registration, the higher number of registrations are the reflection of our success, and that really encourages us. Thank you.